Alright guys, welcome to this brand new training. In here we are going to be going over how to create secure REST APIs for your web application. If you are a brand new developer and you're like, what the hell in the world is a REST API? Not to worry, we're gonna deep dive into it where you are going to be able to understand this very thoroughly by the time you're done with this. And if you're an advanced developer, you are going to learn a few tips and tricks that is going to help you create a very secure REST APIs. All right, so let's continue. So let's dive right into it. What in the world is a REST API? So more than likely, if you ever worked on a project in which you have to talk to the server side and get some information back. For example, let's just look at this as an example where you had this URL, which is also known as the endpoint. So for example, this one, which is called design/projects and then blah. And in here, what you can do is you can send a query parameter in which your backend server will accept and do whatever it needs to do with it to validate it. You can do it this way, or you can also do it this way in terms of where you can say designed projects and then only provide a specific ID that you want a information back. You can also create it by using a put endpoint, as well as you can delete it and you can get all of it as well. Or if you want, you can get a very specific to say for this particular project, go to this workspace and this is the workspace ID and then type is blah, 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 blah. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. You have a very specific URL in which it's going to ask you for a very specific information that you can look it up. So if you're like, Mark, this is all fine and dandy, but how am I ever going to use this? Believe it or not, you still use it up in your projects right now. So let me show you what we are going to be building together in this video training. All right, before we get started, one thing you need to do is to have a local server installed in your PC, Mac, Linux machine, whatever that you're using. I'm going to be using XAMPP. And if you want to use it, I'm going to give you a link in which you can watch the video that will help you install it and get familiarized yourself with it, how to use it. So if you are in that boat, you could just click on the link in the description and from there just watch the quick little video and you will be all caught up. So let me open up my XAMPP. So here it is. So I'm gonna go to my folder. Well, let me just show you what I have done. So this is my XAMPP folder. In here, I created a folder called temp. So if you want to follow the same structure, you can. And in here, we have several folders and files. So the first one is your htaccess. There's nothing special about it, but you can look into it. And then this config is what is going to be connecting to the database, which I'm going to be talking about it. And then you got the index file, which pretty much routes all the stuff. And not to worry, you're going to have access to all of these folders and files that you have here. That way you can easily play around with it and customize it in your own personalized application, in your web application more specifically. So let's dive right into the folder structure. What you are going to be getting, the very first folder, which is the DB. In here, I have a MySQL database tables that you can literally just import it in there and you'll be good to go. Just so you understand how to import it in case you are brand new, you're like, I don't know how to import this crap. How do I do it? So if you're using XAMPP, you pretty much just go to MySQL and where it says admin, you click on this button and then it's going to open up this particular window and In here, you need to create a database. And how do you create database? You go to databases, and then in here you type in database. So let me just start from scratch for you in case you're like, I don't know how to do this crap. So I'm gonna start from scratch. So let's go here, go to back, go to database. So I'm gonna delete it. Where is it? There it is. So I'm gonna check this one, then I'm gonna drop it. So right now I have nothing there. So what you need to do is you open this up in your favorite text editor. Mine happens to be Sublime, but you can use whatever text editor you like. So basically what you do is you just copy this database name, and then you go here, under here, and you paste it, and you click on create. And now you have a database. And from here, you can click on import, choose a file, and it's gonna ask you, where do you wanna import it from? So I already have it where htdocs, temp, and then db. I'm gonna import that in there. You click on go, and then your files and table is already installed. Just simply, it's really that simple. And once you have successfully installed it, imported, or rather, you're gonna have two tables. One is gonna be IP, another one is gonna be users. So let's go to users, and I'm gonna just clean this up so we can start from scratch. So there's nothing there. Awesome. So we have a database that we can connect to it. So let's go here. So I'm gonna move this over here. So I'm gonna go to my temp folder in here, and once I click on that, I will have this screen. This is something that I created so it will make it easier for you to play around with it to see how does this work. But if you just want to create your own, you can. And let me walk you through what happens next as far as the databases and the folders go. So I'm going to go back here. So let's walk through our folder structure. So the first one was the DB, which we literally just went through it, how to install the database into your MySQL admin database. And the next one is called include. And here you are gonna have a few files, and let's walk through that. All right, so first one is the folder called libs. Pretty much this is where all your libraries gonna be included, and there are only two libraries. One is the Alto router and then simple DB class. Basically this one, what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to have a route where you can easily send your information to on the server side. And then this one is just going to connect to the database. Simple as that. It's nothing really complicated. You will see in a few seconds when you're like, oh my God, it's so simple. And just FYI, for me personally, I like this particular class a lot more than any of the other routing PHP side of it, because it is super easy to use and it's very, very powerful. In my personal opinion, I love it. I use it for all my projects and it has not failed on me once. So I can totally vouch for this. All right, let's move on. So we have our function in here, and then a validator, and then setting. So let's just go through here. So before we do this, let's go back to one folder, and then let's open up our index file, which is the main file that you will be going through it when it goes through and open up your files. Well, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Sorry about that, guys. I'm a little off my game here. So basically what happens is when you go to this folder, the very first file that is going to load up is this. So that's what's going to happen here. So all of this stuff, basically what it's doing is going to get the actual URL of your specific folder. So being that, like, for example, localhost temp, and this is the URL, and that is what's happening here. So nothing special. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I would just literally copy and paste it, and life is good. All right, so let's move on to the next part. So this part is something that a lot of people have problems with when they are creating a REST APIs, because if you don't include this particular line in your PHP, then sometime depending on your hosting server, they will not allow you to pass information from your client to your server, and it will this is known as cross domain error message. And a lot of people have lost long sleep over this, and I'm being one of them. And until I figure this out, and this one line of code, it will save you a lot of time. So make sure you include that in here, and then your life is good. You can pass information to your server and send information to your client as well. So let's move on. So this is just a variable that says this is the URL, which is, in this case, it would be like this. For example, temp host, localhost temp. This is going to be the URL, which is this, and then you have the absolute path, which would be, for example, if I go here, it's gonna be saying, hey, you're gonna go to htdoc temp and then whatever folder in here. That's what this means. And let's go to the other folder. I know I'm kind of going all over the place, but I want to make sure you understand the structure and why we are using what we're using at what point we're using it at. So the next part is the settings file. So as I explained before, this is the absolute path, and then in here, which is a temp folder, and then from there you're gonna go to include, and there's a file called settings. If I open this up, in here basically I'm including the router file, class file, DB class file, function, and validator. Nothing special is happening here. So let's look at those files. So in here, let's look at the function file. So in here, you're gonna have a few functions, one of them being the appdb. What this is going to do is it's going to allow you to connect to this database that we have installed in our PHP MyAdmin. And that's what this function is going to do. It takes a few parameters for it to connect us. So one of them being the DB host user password name. And how does this work? As you look at this file, and let me open it up here. So this is just the parameters that says, hey, the host name is localhost, and the database name is this, and the user is this. So I know it's probably like, okay, this is fine and dandy, but how do I actually make this thing work? And what is it really going to do? You're probably wondering, like, this is like all this time into it, you explain the different things, but what the hell is it? How do I use it? Like, show me some code, show me something, right? All right. I promise you I'm going to be showing you that pretty soon. So far we got the settings taken care of, and then in here, this is how you initialize your router with the auto router. You literally just copy and paste this in here, and life is great. And then we have these routes. And then last but not least, we have this part where it says, hey, if all the routes in here, if it doesn't find it here, then you want to throw the last one, which is going to be just blank. Hey, I don't know what to do with it, so I'm going to give you this error message. So for example, if I go in here and type in something, blah, 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 blah. So this is what it says. Hey, I don't know where this route is because you didn't define it, so I don't know what to do. So that's what this does. All right, so let's move on. So we are done with this index file. Now I can actually show you stuff that is going to make a lot more sense to you. All right, so let me show you how this file gets created. So in your routes folder, if you go to the very first one, which is the home, in here, what this does is it's gonna give you this. Remember when I said that this is just the app URL, which means it's exact URL wherever you have the file set up as. And this is for your users table, this is for your IP table, and then from your views folder, there's file called home, and that is what is included in your very first route. So this is what happens when you go to this page. And from here, this is where you're gonna absolutely start to love this thing. So what this does is it will allow you to do two things. One is to create user, and another one is look up IP addresses. Now you might be wondering, like, okay, that's great. Isn't that what I normally do with my application? Yes, it is exactly what you do with your own application if you want to talk to your MySQL. However, now start thinking, you're gonna create this application in which other people are going to be using your back end server to extract information from it. So start thinking from that point away. So when somebody's using your back end side server, what do you need to do to make sure they don't number one, hijack your database and give you other stuff that may corrupt your database? So you need to account for that. Number two, how do you validate that whatever they are sending you exactly is what you need to check for? And number three, what critical information should you send them back? So all those three things that we are going to be going through it. So let's go look at the route. If you go back to routes, and we're going to look at the user route. So in here, I'm going to close this out, and then this is the home, which is the UI, and you guys can look at this. It's coming from your view folder. The file is called home PHP. You can look at this, and this is right here. I just created this in here to give you a nice visual. That's not what we are actually going to be focusing on. This is just a user interface to say, hey, this is what we're doing. So what we're doing in here is like we can create users. So if we go here, and then we can create user by giving it a email address. So if I go back to my tables and then click on users, right now there is no entry whatsoever for a user. So if I want a user to be created, what specifically do I need from my users? That way I can create a user ID. So in this case, what I'm saying is if I go here, so I'm just going to close this out. So in this case, this is the first API, which is the API /user. Hopefully, I am not confusing you too much. If I am, I apologize. And you can definitely feel free to send me your questions, and I will be more than happy to answer all of your questions. So let's move on. So in here, what we are saying is go to this user, this endpoint, after I click on add user. So go to this endpoint, which is your API user, and then the request will be post. And then I have this function called app_validate_entries. So what this is going to look for is, it's going to say, hey, make sure when somebody sends me this information, it has a query string that has email and then whatever it is assigned to. So what that means is, so let's just say if I say localhost /temp/API users, and then it's going to have a question mark and then email equal mkgmail.com. So that's what this thing is looking for, to make sure it has this parameter. If it doesn't, like for example, if I put in 1, then it's going to say, hey, you need to give me this parameter I'm looking for. So that's how you, number one, validate to make sure that you get all the variables that you need to process the request. And I have included this in your functions file, and which is right over here, validate entries. So what you can do for your future applications, you can literally just say validate, and then the element is post request, and followed by, you can put in an array. You could have, like, for example, in your application you may be looking for a user ID, so you could say email user ID, and then it will look for a user ID. If it can't find it, it's going to throw an error message saying, hey, this is required and you need to give me this, otherwise I will not let you go further. So that's that. And then also there's another file called validator, and you guys can have access to it when you download this file, which the link will be in the description. And there's several different validators that will allow you to validate all your users' entries, and then it will make your life a whole lot easier. So the next step is to make sure that whatever email that person sent is the right format. So let me show you how that works. So for example, if I click in here and just type in Mark and not do anything else, don't correctly type in the format, and then I'm gonna click on add, then it's gonna say, hey, this is an invalid email. So how do we get this? We get this from here. So for example, if I type in MK, save it, and if I click on add new, then it's gonna say MK save it. And this particular function is also included for you in here. So what you basically do is, unlike your other PHP application in which you would have to say, hey, if you want to send something bad that is a JSON array, then you will have to first say echo, and then you have to type in JSON underscore encoded, and then whatever the message, whether it be my name is blah, 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 blah. This particular function takes care of all of that. So all you really have to do is use this function, create an array, which sends a parameter of a status, error, whatever else you want to. So whatever array that you want to put in there, it will format it for you in a JSON format. Just to show you what that means is, like, for example, if I click here and let me refresh this. So I'm gonna click here and I'm gonna say Mark, add. So in here, see how it becomes nicely formatted JSON. And if I click on headers, and this is the actual parameter that is sent, which was email. All right, so having said all that, so let's just properly import this in here. So I'm gonna say mark@gmail.com, and then I'm gonna click add user. Then it's gonna say, hey, I added your information. So if we go back to our database here and then refresh the table, come on, refresh. All right, so there's the ID. There's the email, there's the ID that automatically generated. So let's go back here. So let's see what happens after it has validated all of this. I'm gonna delete this out. So the next thing what it does is, as I said before, it connects to a database. Pretty simple function. You don't have to worry too much about it. And then to clean out any SQL injections, so use this line, and then you put in the email parameter, that query string that was in there. And then you say you go to user table. So basically what it's saying, select all from user table where email is equal to this. If the email already exists, if I'm trying to create this, then it's going to give an error message saying, hey, email already existed. If email does not exist, then I'm going to insert it by using this function called insert. So it's going to be table, and then whatever information I want to insert, it takes two parameters. So the first one is the table. Second one is the array that is going to be inserted in. And also in this function file, there is a where is it? Here it is. So there is a app auto function hash. So what that does is it will automatically create a 8-digit hash for you. So you don't have to do anything. So you might find these functions very, very helpful in your projects. So do take full advantage of it in your projects. I have used this function in all of my projects, and they have saved me tremendous amount of headaches and pain, and not have to recreate them again and again and again. So if nothing else, that particular file itself is going to save you a lot of time. All right, so moving on. So it creates a API key, which will be under the column user API key, and then user ID. It's just a random generated alphanumeric key, and then an email. And this is exactly what happens here. So let me just copy this code here, and I'll just put it in the notepad on the side. So if I try to reinsert this, and I should get an error message that says, hey, email already exists, like we thought we would get it here, the first check. All right, so now you have seen this, you can create it, and once it's done, it's going to give you a success message with the email and the API key. Now that's great, wonderful. So what happens if you want to get that particular user's information? This is how you do it from the front end side, meaning you click here, you get this, blah, 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 life is great, right? That's great. But if another way you can do is you can go to this URL. So let me go here, and I'm gonna just say, so, all right. So if I go to this particular URL, now this is what it will look like if somebody is looking to access your database via the API URL, which in this case, the API URL is localhost temp API user. And as you can see, it gives you an error message and it says missing API key. Because this particular function, as I said before, it will look to validate if the key parameters are available in the URL or not. If they're not, it's going to give you a message saying, hey, you're missing that. With me so far? Hope that makes sense. All right, so once we include that API key in here, and how we can do that is by adding a question mark equal, and let's just, I'm going to put in some random key, 1, 2, 3, very secure, I know. And then it's going to say, hey, no record find for that, and it's going to give you an error message. Great. So this is validating to make sure that this is the part right here where it validates to say, hey, I got this key in here, and I'm going to look it up if it exists in this table. If it does not exist, then I'm going to give you an error message saying that, hey, that API key is crap, it doesn't exist. So this time around, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the right key and then do this. So if I click on it just to show you, give you a little better version of looking at things. So if I refresh it and I click here and then go to preview, now this should look a little prettier, I guess. Anyway, so this is the API key that I put in there, and this is status success, and this is the information that I got back. And that's it. That's how you get it. And you might be wondering, like, okay, this is great, fine, dandy, whatever. This is something that I normally do. Yes. But the only difference is now if you are creating an application in which other people need to access your information, you will have to start thinking, okay, what parameters or checks do I need to put in which they don't hack my system? One. Number two, I don't give them a wrong information so other people can use it. So that's the whole point of it. So having said all that, let's go on to the next part of it. So we have a key. Now, once we have a key, in this case, this is validated, right? So the next thing, what we want to do is once we have the key that we looked it up here, the following thing that we want to do is we want to go to the IP address, and then we want to say, hey, give me the IP address information, whatever IP that I provide. So in this case, I'll say, I'm going to go to the IP and I'm going to put in the key here. And if I put in the wrong IP address, let's say blah, 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 blah. And then it's going to say, hey, invalid IP address. So let's look at that. So I'm going to close this out since we're already done with this. And let's go back to routes and look up this. So in here, it's only one route. And one of this is a little different than what we went through it earlier. So the Alto router gives you a very, very easy way to customize any of your routes. So if you never used this kind of URL before, you're like, what the hell is this? I don't know what that is. So let me walk you through it. So if I go here and I'll say all this equal this. So the first parameter is the IP address, so blah, blah, blah. Second parameter is the key, I'll say blah, blah, blah. So that is not working. The reason being is because I need to add a slash at the back. Okay. So other way of validating information is you can have one parameter, which will be, in this case, the IP address. And second parameter of the URL will be your API key. So you can validate it the way I showed you before with a query parameter, or you can make it as URL. So in here, we're going to validate it via the URL. So what I'll do is I'll put in a valid IP address. So let's just say this one. And not to worry, you're going to get a copy of this when you download the program or the source code. So don't worry about it, memorizing anything. You could just literally just paste it. So now what it says, hey, the IP is good to go. However, the API key is not valid. And this is what's happening here. The first step is to check to see if, once again, this is in your validator file that you are going to get access to it. Check to see if the IP address someone put it in, is it valid? Number one, right? If it's not, then crap, you don't know what, you need to give them an error message, the invalid IP address. However, if it's valid, the next step, check to see if the API key is in the database or not. So how this works is, the first parameter, you could put this here, *:A. So that represents IP address. *:B represents API key. And then you could do bracket. So let me just type it for you. Bracket *:C bracket. And you can build this on as you go along. So you could build this until whatever, depending on how many different parameters you're looking for in the URL. And let's move on to the next part where it checks for the API key. Once it finds the API key, when it cannot find the API key, it's going to say, hey, the API key doesn't exist. However, if it finds a valid API key, then it's going to go into the IP table, look for the IP address that was given, and then import or give them all the data associated with it. However, I have given you another pretty cool function. So what this function does is, so for example, let me do this just to show you what it will do. So I'm going to close this out. So let's just give it a valid API key. as well. So I'm gonna do this. And where is the error message? Is this? All right, so if I refresh it now and put in the valid API key, here we go. So we'll look this up. Check this out. This is going to be pretty cool. You're going to be really amazed with this. So right now, it looks for, what's the IP address? Hang on. It's 114. Okay, so it looks for this particular row. And then it says, hey, I found this row. I want to give you everything. The ID, the time zone, the zip, so on and so forth. However, if for some reason you don't want to give that person the IP address or the ID or any other column that you don't want to give them, you can use this function that is called app remove element key. The first one is the array, and the second one is going to be whatever columns you don't want to include. So in this case, I don't want to include IP ID and IP hash. So if I do this and I refresh it, and I'll click on this just to give you a pretty view, and now the ID is no longer there. And for example, if I want to take this IP address out that was here, and I could literally just go here and say IP address, and that's that, and then hit refresh, and there's no IP address. So let's look at this on the front end side, see how it looks. So here it is. So API key is that, IP address is that. So let's go here. So pretty much that's what it looks like. Hopefully, after almost 40 minutes of this video, that this makes sense to you. If you have any questions, or if I confuse you, or you just want to ask me a question related to this, feel free to get with me. Also, don't forget to get your free gift at codewithmark.com/gift. You're going to be really happy with that gift. All right, guys, until next time, I'll talk to you later.